let me get to the Asian American specific impact on this, because in California, there was a vote on affirmative action, you see, and it went down pretty heavily. The Board of Regents of the University of California commissioned this huge study of their own experts that came up and said, actually keeping the SAT is the most effective way to reach smart young minorities, new immigrants, poor Black kids, and so on. Still, they were overruled, and it's out. And SATs are under siege, obviously, throughout the United States.
So that study came out around February of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like they commissioned a group of faculty experts to answer a series of questions such as, is the SAT biased by race? And they went and they studied it, for, a number of months, and they came back with a 200-page report saying, no, in fact, it's like we've studied it. Right. It's actually not like racially biased, and it actually gives opportunity to poor people of promise who would not otherwise be identified. And that was the recommendation. That was the official recommendation that they had sought. And then, a guy dies under horrible circumstances in Minneapolis, and the thing is out the window. And, the same thing happened in Princeton, where they created like a commission to study whether we should get rid of Woodrow Wilson, right? And his identification with the university, his name, and like Woodrow Wilson was like a vicious, right? Like anti-Black racist by any standard.
One of the worst in American history.
But he's also a figure who is strongly identified with the legacy of Princeton. So they did their study, and they came back with a recommendation, a formal recommendation that, like, no, in fact, like, we want to contextualize him, we want to sort of confront and talk about the history, but we don't want to dissociate from him entirely. Like he's a foundational figure in the history of this university. And that came in like around April of 2020. And then, of course, and I'm sure they had every intention of adhering to that recommendation. That was the recommendation they were actually looking for, right? And then like a month later, of course, it was all off the table. Now with affirmative action, this all goes back to the politics of the 1990s, right? So in the 1990s, the electorate was still majority white, right? But the overall demographics of California was no longer majority white. And so they reached the demographic tipping point that America as a whole is going to reach in the year 2040. And so the sort of diminishing white electoral majority, they voted to deny, certain public services to undocumented immigrants, and they voted to, forbid the use of racial preferences in government contracting, in university admissions, and so on. And so the idea for those who wanted to reinstitute this was that the racial demographics of the electorate is going to change in the future, and then we can come back for a second bite of the apple, and then we'll reverse this thing once once California is no longer a majority white, backward-looking, electorate, and so that's what 2020 was, right? And so they came back for that second bite of the apple at the point at which the country is, the state is demographically dominated by Hispanics, and where they are an electoral plurality. Right. And so, like, in fact, if you look at the politics of this, it actually was one minority group, Hispanics, using their political power in the legislature to take things away from another minority group, Asian Americans, all while declaring their fight against a white supremacy that no longer actually exists. Right. And so that's one part of the sort of absurd comedy of it. And then the other part of the absurd comedy ended up being, of course, this newly diverse electorate then went to the polls, expressed their democratic will, and it turned out that they defeated it by an even greater. They defeated affirmative action by an even greater margin than the white demographic had done so. And so, even in this election, Hispanics and Asian Americans voted against the measure at a higher rate than white Americans, right, or than white Californians. And so, it's a sort of a ringing sort of repudiation, but it's one of the handful of times when a policy that is for the most part subject to the undemocratic will of elites, of administrators and so on, gets the test of democratic, seeks democratic validation. And yet again, right, like we have not succeeded in educating our public into the state of enlightenment that we're seeking. And it's like the rate at which those who oppose the reinstitution of affirmative action were able to spend, right? They were outspent like 9-1, right? And all of the great and good of California, its political class, its institutional class, its university presidents, its corporations were arrayed behind the push. And it met a group of people, Asian American and Hispanic voters, who, especially in the case of Hispanics, who would be net beneficiaries of the change, their moral intuitions as new Americans told them, no, we don't want a society gerrymandered by race.
Yeah.
And however, it doesn't ultimately matter, because then the regents went ahead and they got rid of the SAT. And so ultimately this is an elite policy in the hands of an elite, and the sort of like what the formal law says doesn't really matter that much. So the example that I use is that the medical school at UCSF, University of San Francisco, they announced the racial demographics of their next year's class, and the racial demographics of the next year's class went down, like the Asian share went down by 40%. Right. So like Asians were like something like 60% of their demographics the year before. Now they went ahead and did this in advance of the referendum. So they went ahead and did this in advance of it being legal. Like the prior referendum was still the controlling law, but they just said, no, we're just going to go ahead and do this thing that we really want to do. And we're going to give you a model of what things will look like. And so like the Hispanic and Black share went up by 15 to 20 points in both cases. I think there were slightly more whites, right, than before, and a huge chunk taken out of the Asian representation at that school. And so that was a model of what we can expect under the equity agenda, under the successor regime.